National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is in China. And the timing could hardly be more interesting. Doval is in Beijing for the 25th round of special representative talks on the India-China boundary question. He has already met Chinese Vice President Zheng, while talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang are focused on the border dispute and other issues between the two countries. Now, on paper, this is diplomacy as usual. India and China are trying to stabilize a relationship badly damaged by the 2020 Galwan clash and prolonged military standoff in eastern Ladakh. But there is another interesting development happening at exactly the same time. India has just formally mapped 27 locations in Arunachal Pradesh using their standard Indian names. And China is furious. So what is exactly going on? Because while Doval is in Beijing trying to keep the relationship on track, India and China are simultaneously fighting something that looks deceptively harmless, a war of names. But if you think maps are just pieces of paper with mountains, rivers and dots on them, well, China would like to have a word with you.
In matters relating to the border areas between India and China, we have always emphasized in discussions with the Chinese side that we consider these issues as most serious and that the maintenance of peace and tranquility in these areas is of the utmost importance. We have also stated that the state of the border affairs will reflect on the state of our larger bilateral ties. This was also reiterated at the recently held 36th WMCC meeting on India-China border affairs, which was held on 6th, and you are already aware of the statement that we put out. At this meeting, the two sides engaged in frank discussions and reviewed the situation along the line of actual control. The Indian side again underlined that maintaining peace and tranquility in the border areas is essential for the overall development of bilateral relations. It was agreed to continue to use existing mechanisms, diplomatic and military channels, including the WMCC, local commander level meetings, and other agreed mechanisms to resolve outstanding issues and avoid misunderstanding and miscalculation along the line of actual control.
On 7th of August, the Government of India updated official Survey of India maps to formally identify 27 geographical features in Arunachal Pradesh. These include 21 land areas and settlements, 4 mountain passes, 1 high-altitude lake, and 1 memorial. Among the names are Longju, Maja, Bisa, Jairampur, Jaswantgarh, and Kamlan Nagar. The mountain passes include Zola, Rizala, Pukurla, and the strategically important Thagla. Thagla served as an opening battle site flashpoint in the 1962 Sino-Indian War. There is also Shambhu Sarovar and the Shere Thapa Memorial. Now India says this is not a new territorial claim. The government's position is simple. These spaces are already Indian, and the map is merely officially recording them under the recognized Indian names. But Beijing doesn't see it that way. China called India's move illegal, null and void, and has again rejected the very use of the term Arunachal Pradesh. But why? Because China has been playing this exact game for years. Since 2017, Beijing has released 6 separate lists assigning Chinese and Tibetan names to the locations in Arunachal Pradesh. Chinese sources now put the number at 112 names. Beijing calls Arunachal Pradesh Zhangnan, southern Tibet, and claims the entire state. So China has been trying to redraw the narrative to nomenclature. And now India is effectively saying, if you want to play the naming game, fine. We can play too.
Regarding the reaction which came from when we put out those 27 names, so let me reiterate this yet again, that Arunachal Pradesh is an inalienable and integral part of India, and this is a fact which is self-evident. At the same time, let me also underline that nothing can change this indisputable reality.
But why does China care so much about names? Because for Beijing, cartography is not necessarily just cartography. Major names, official documents, and administrative terminology can become tools of territorial messaging. Give a place a new name. Put that name on official maps. Use it in government documents. Repeat it diplomatically. And over time, you're trying to make your territorial claim look like an established fact.
India does not violate China's sovereignty in any manner and has been consistent, but China is in illegal occupation of Indian territories in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh since 1963, where India's right is officially acknowledged even by China. Also, there are Chinese projects on territories in Jammu and Kashmir that belong to India, and we object to that.
This is precisely why India's latest move matters. It isn't creating Indian sovereignty over Arunachal Pradesh. It is reinforcing the Indian administrative and geographical record of the territory that New Delhi already considers unquestionably Indian. And some of these names aren't random either. Take Longju. In 1959, Longju became one of the early flashpoints between India and Chinese forces. Then came 1962, and suddenly, names like Thagla weren't merely geographical markers. They were associated with the military history of the India-China conflict. So when India formally puts these names on its maps, it is also reminding everyone, these aren't abstract lines on maps. There is history attached to every one of them. And this is where the larger question comes in. Is China simply angry about a map? Or is it angry because India has started understanding this game? For years, Beijing has combined military pressure, diplomacy, maps, infrastructure, nomenclature, and political messaging. Former Indian diplomat Vijay Gokhale has described China's approach as stock and take strategy. Negotiate, manage tensions, but use force selectively when Beijing believes the timing is advantageous. And this isn't merely about soldiers standing across the LAC. Territorial disputes are also fought by bureaucrats, historians, diplomats, map makers, and propagandists, which means the map is part of the battlefield. And India appears increasingly willing to acknowledge that. Which brings us back to Ajit Doval. Here is the fascinating part. India is not choosing between diplomacy and confrontation. It is doing both. Doval is in Beijing talking about stabilizing relations and managing the boundary dispute. At the same time, Delhi is formally reinforcing its own cartographic position on Arunachal Pradesh. That is particularly significant with the BRICS summit approaching and Xi Jinping expected in Delhi next month. The old Indian instinct might have been to not upset Beijing with a big summit coming up, to postpone anything controversial. But India's latest record and its latest move suggests a different calculation. Diplomacy does not necessarily mean strategic silence. In fact, history shows that China itself has never treated summit diplomacy as a reason to completely switch off strategic pressure. Remember Xi Jinping's 2014 visit to India. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted Xi between September 17 and 19 in 2014, Chinese and Indian troops were simultaneously locked in a confrontation in the Chumar sector. So perhaps Delhi has learned an important lesson. A handshake does not require you to put your map away. Then there is Tibet. If Beijing insists on calling Arunachal Pradesh Southern Tibet, then it inevitably raises a much larger historical and political question on China's claim on Tibet itself. This exposes the logic of Beijing's nomenclature games. If names are supposed to determine sovereignty, then the history behind those names suddenly becomes very complicated. And that is precisely why China has been so careful about terminology. So what is Doval's Beijing visit really telling us? Perhaps that India wants to stabilize the relationship without surrendering the strategic contest. The special representative's mechanism is now more than 2 decades old. It hasn't solved the boundary dispute, but it remains an important channel to prevent that dispute from spiraling out of control. At the same time, India appears to be recognizing that de-escalation on the border cannot mean allowing Beijing to write the narrative unchallenged. China has its maps, India has its maps. China has its names, and you see, India also has its official names. And behind all of this is the fundamental reality. The India-China border dispute isn't fought only at 15,000 feet. It is fought in conference rooms, on maps, It is fought through language, and increasingly it is fought in the battle over who gets to define reality. Doval may be in Beijing to smooth things over, but Delhi is also making something very clear. Dialogue, yes. De-escalation, yes. But when it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, India isn't outsourcing the map to Beijing. This is Shivangi Mukherjee for India Abroad.